My childhood friend exposed my family's darkest secret. What if a childhood friend revealed a family deception so dark it shattered everything you believed? This is the story of how one casual reunion uncovered lies buried for decades and changed a family forever. Part 1. The reunion that changed everything. How would you react if a casual reunion with a childhood friend suddenly exposed the darkest secret your family ever kept? What if that secret wasn't a mistake, but a carefully constructed deception hiding in plain sight for decades? My childhood friend didn't just re-enter my life. They blew it apart by revealing a massive family deception. I'm talking about years of lies, finally brought to light by the most unexpected person. I grew up believing my family was ordinary. Sure, every household has its quirks: dad's obsession with order, mom's insistence on keeping certain rooms off limits, and the unspoken rule that certain topics were never to be mentioned at the dinner table. But to me, those were just the threads of normal family life. I didn't question them. I didn't dare to. Our house was warm, filled with laughter during birthdays and holidays, and the walls carried the echoes of Sunday mornings when my father's vinyl records would play while mom baked something sweet. To the outside world, we looked like the picture of stability: hardworking parents, polite kids, smiles and photographs, and an address in a quiet, respectable neighborhood. But there were shadows, subtle ones, flickering at the edges of that perfect picture. Whenever I asked about my grandparents on my father's side, he grew quiet, his jaw tightening before he'd change the subject. Whenever I found old boxes in the attic and asked mom about the yellowed letters and strange photographs, she would snap the lid shut and say, "Some things aren't meant for children." I accepted these things because children are trained to. If the adults in your life draw a line, you learn to stop crossing it. And so, my childhood was painted in bright colors with faint cracks I pretended not to see. By the time I reached my mid-20s, life had taken me far from home. I moved across the country for work, built a career, and tried to carve my own path separate from the shadows of my family. For years, I barely looked back. Phone calls on birthdays, occasional visits for Christmas, and a polite distance that kept everything intact. But life has a way of reintroducing the past when you least expect it. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening. I had just wrapped up a long day at work when I ducked into a small coffee shop near my apartment. I remember the smell of roasted beans, the low hum of conversation, and the way the door chimed as I stepped inside. That's when I saw him. Daniel, my childhood best friend. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. The last time I remembered seeing him, we were gangly teenagers, kicking a worn-out soccer ball in the street until the streetlights flickered on and our mothers called us home. Then his family moved away, suddenly, without explanation. One summer he was there, and by the next, his house was empty. And now here he was, standing at the counter, ordering a black coffee like he'd always done even as a kid when he was far too young to drink it. His hair was shorter, his frame leaner, his eyes older, but it was him. "Daniel," I called out before I could stop myself. He turned, and for a moment his face lit up with recognition, followed by something else: hesitation, maybe even dread. We hugged awkwardly, the kind of embrace two people give when they're trying to bridge a decade of silence with a single gesture. We sat down, and the conversation flowed easily at first. Where had life taken us? What jobs did we have now? Who had gotten married? Who hadn't? It felt like patching holes in a tapestry, weaving together the missing years. But as the minutes passed, I noticed something strange. Whenever I mentioned my family, my parents, my siblings, Daniel's expression changed. His eyes would narrow slightly, his fingers tapping nervously against his coffee cup. It wasn't obvious at first, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Finally, I asked, "What is it? You look like you're holding something back." He hesitated. His gaze dropped to the table. The silence stretched so long I thought he might not answer. And then, with a quiet, almost broken voice, he said, "I shouldn't be the one to tell you this, but your family isn't what you think it is." The words landed like a thunderclap. My pulse quickened, my throat dry. "What do you mean?" I demanded, half laughing, half panicked. "That sounds ridiculous. What are you talking about?" Daniel looked up at me, and for the first time that evening, I realized he wasn't the boy I used to know. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had been holding onto something far too heavy for far too long. "Do you really not know?" he asked. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't teasing, wasn't exaggerating, wasn't playing games. He was dead serious. Something in his tone, in the tremble of his voice, told me that whatever he was about to reveal would change everything I thought I knew about my family. I wanted to push him, to demand the truth right then and there. But instead, I found myself frozen, the words caught in my throat. Because a part of me already knew that the cracks in my childhood weren't just cracks. They were fault lines. And Daniel was about to be the earthquake that would split my world wide open. Part 2. Cracks in the foundation. Daniel stirred his coffee so long that I thought he might never speak again. The spoon clinked against the ceramic cup in a rhythm that set my nerves on edge. I leaned forward, lowering my voice as if the strangers around us could somehow overhear secrets that weren't even mine yet. "Daniel," I pressed, "stop circling around it. What are you talking about?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. His voice was low, strained, like every word hurt to say. "Back when we were kids, my family left town suddenly. You remember that, right?" "Of course," I said. "One day you were there, and the next gone. No explanation. My parents just told me you moved for your dad's job." Daniel gave a bitter laugh. "That's the story, isn't it? That's what everyone believed. But that's not why we left." I frowned. "Then why?" He glanced around the cafe, as if still paranoid that someone might be listening. Then he leaned in. "We left because of your family." The words hit me like ice water. "What are you talking about?" "My family. My parents barely even interacted with yours." "That's what you thought." His gaze locked on mine, sharp and unflinching. "But our families were tangled in ways you never realized. And when my parents decided they couldn't live with the lies anymore, they packed up and ran. For my sake. For theirs. But they couldn't protect me from everything. Not forever." I sat back, the chair creaking beneath me. My pulse roared in my ears. "What lies?" "Daniel, you can't just drop this on me without explaining." He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded, yellowed photograph and slid it across the table. My hands trembled as I picked it up. At first glance, it looked like an old family picture, faded colors, smiling faces. But then my heart stopped. It was my mother, younger, maybe in her 20s, her hair longer but unmistakably her. She was standing with a man I didn't recognize, his arm draped around her shoulders. And in her arms was a baby. I felt my stomach twist. "That's not Dad," I whispered. "No," Daniel said quietly. "It isn't." The world tilted. I blinked hard, staring at the baby's face, trying to make sense of it. The child's features were blurry in the faded photo, but something about the eyes struck me with a strange, familiar ache. "That baby," I said slowly. "Is that supposed to be me?" Daniel didn't answer right away. His silence was more damning than any words could have been. I set the photo down as if it had burned me. My voice cracked. "Where did you get this?" "My parents kept it," he said. "They told me someday I might need it. That I should know the truth if you ever came looking. They were afraid your parents would bury everything so deep you'd never find it. But I guess they underestimated the past." I shook my head violently, like I could shake his words away. No, this doesn't make sense. My dad, he's my father. He raised me." "He raised you, yes," Daniel cut in. "But he didn't father you." The cafe felt too small, too bright, too suffocating. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. "This is insane," I muttered. "You're telling me my entire life, my family, is a lie? That my mom cheated? That my dad knew? Why would they hide something like that?" Daniel's gaze softened, but his words were merciless. "Because the deception went deeper than just an affair. Your family didn't just lie to protect feelings. They lied to protect themselves. And to protect you. Protect me from what?" He looked at me with a grimness that made my stomach turn. From the man in that picture. From who he really was. A chill ran down my spine. The air between us grew heavy, thick with the weight of unsaid things. I whispered, "Who was he?" Daniel opened his mouth, then shut it again, as though even saying the name might summon something dangerous. He leaned closer. "All I'll say right now is this. He wasn't just some guy your mom met. He was someone powerful, someone dangerous. And your parents made choices that changed everything, not just for them, but for everyone around them." I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper. "You're scaring me, Daniel." "You should be scared," he said quietly. "Because once you start pulling at this thread, you won't be able to stop. And when you see the whole picture, you'll never look at your family the same way again." I stared at the photograph on the table, the edges curling from age. My mother's smile seemed almost mocking now, frozen in time with a man I'd never known, holding a child who might, or might not, be me. For the first time in my life, I realized the foundation of my family wasn't just cracked. It was built on lies, and the whole house of cards was about to collapse. And Daniel, my childhood friend, was standing there, ready to knock it all down. Part 3. The Confrontation. The photograph burned in my pocket the entire way home. Every step felt heavier, like gravity itself had doubled. My mind replayed Daniel's words again and again. He wasn't your father. He was someone powerful, someone dangerous. By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped my keys. I locked the door, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the faded image as if staring long enough would somehow make it lie to me. But no matter how I turned it, no matter how much I willed it to change, the truth stared back. I had to confront them. I dialed my mother first. Her voice came through the phone, warm, familiar, the sound of childhood lullabies and Sunday morning breakfasts. "Sweetheart, what a surprise. Everything okay?" I swallowed hard. "Mom, I need to come over. Tonight." There was a pause, brief but loaded. "Of course. Is something wrong?" I'll explain when I get there." When I hung up, my hands were slick with sweat. Their house hadn't changed. The same white shutters, the same carefully trimmed hedges, the same porch light glowing like a beacon against the night. But stepping inside felt different now. The smell of cinnamon from Mom's candles, the sight of Dad's slippers by the door, none of it comforted me. It all felt staged, like props on a set designed to trick me into believing in a world that wasn't real. They greeted me with smiles, but I saw the flicker of concern in their eyes. "Come in, honey," Mom said, kissing my cheek. "You look pale. Did something happen?" I walked past them, into the living room, and pulled the photograph from my pocket. My hands shook as I held it out. "Explain this." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Mom's face drained of color. Dad's jaw clenched so hard I thought he might break a tooth. "Where did you get that?" Dad demanded, his voice sharp, almost panicked. "From Daniel," I shot back. "You remember him, don't you? The boy who lived next door before his family vanished overnight. He told me you lied, that everything I believed about us was a lie." Mom reached for the photo, but I pulled it back. Her hands hovered in the air, trembling. "Sweetheart, please. Don't call me that right now," I snapped. "I want the truth. Who is he? Who is the man in this picture?" The silence that followed was unbearable. My chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, waiting, demanding. Finally, Dad spoke. His voice was low, controlled, but it carried a weight that made me shiver. "He was your biological father." The world tilted again. Hearing it out loud, confirmed by the very man who had raised me, was like a blade through the chest. My knees weakened, and I dropped into the armchair. "So it's true." Mom sat across from me, her eyes glistening with tears. "We wanted to protect you. We thought it was better if you never knew." "Protect me from what?" My voice cracked with anger. "From who he was. Daniel said he was dangerous." "Was that true?" Mom pressed her hands together, as if in prayer. "He wasn't just dangerous. He was involved in things no child should ever be connected to. He was wealthy, powerful, but cruel. He hurt people. He controlled people. When I met him, I was young and naive, and by the time I realized who he really was, it was too late." My stomach turned. And me? What did I mean to him? Her tears fell then, quiet and steady. A possession, something he could use to control me. When I found out I was pregnant, he didn't care about being a father. He cared about leverage. Dad spoke again, his voice tight. "That's when I stepped in. I loved your mother. I loved you, even before you were born. And I swore I'd raise you as my own. But he wasn't the kind of man you could just walk away from." A chill ran down my spine. "So what happened?" Mom's eyes flickered with pain. "He found out. He found out that your father and I, that we were together, that he intended to raise you as his. And he didn't take it well." I leaned forward, my voice low and sharp. "What did he do?" Dad's hand curled into a fist. "He threatened us. He threatened you. Said he'd take you, raise you himself, mold you into what he wanted. We couldn't let that happen. So we made a choice." "What choice?" My voice was barely above a whisper. Mom looked at me with eyes so broken I almost pitied her. "We disappeared him." The words sent ice through my veins. "What does that mean?" She looked down at her hands. "One day he was there. The next, he wasn't. No one asked questions because people like him had enemies everywhere. But the truth is, your father and I, we made sure he could never hurt us again. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might explode. Are you saying you killed him? Neither of them answered. The silence screamed louder than words ever could. I staggered to my feet, the room spinning. The world I thought I knew was crumbling faster than I could process. My parents, no, the people I thought were my parents, hadn't just lied to me. They had buried a past soaked in blood. And now, thanks to Daniel, the grave was open again. I clutched the photo in my hand, the edges digging into my skin. My voice trembled as I spoke. Why now? Why did Daniel know? Why did his family run? Dad's face hardened. Because they knew too much. They saw too much. And if Daniel's talking now, it means the past we buried isn't as dead as we thought. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I asked. Dad's voice dropped to a whisper. It means someone else is digging. And they won't stop until they find what we tried to erase. Part 4. The unraveling. The silence after my father's words was suffocating. Someone else was digging. Someone else knew. My heart thudded painfully as my mind reeled with possibilities. Who could it be? Why now, after all these years? I looked between my parents, my real father, who had raised me with quiet devotion, and my mother, who now seemed like a stranger cloaked in guilt. The room felt smaller, darker. I could almost hear the walls breathing with secrets. Finally, I found my voice. What if Daniel wasn't just warning me? What if someone used him to get to me? Dad's expression hardened. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. The weight of his words pressed down like a storm. I felt like a pawn on a chessboard I didn't even know existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my old bedroom, the one still painted in faded blues from childhood, staring at the ceiling while fragments of the past collided in my head. Every smile, every bedtime story, every hug now felt tainted by the knowledge that it was all built on deception. Yet, buried beneath the anger, there was gratitude. My dad, no, my stepfather, had loved me unconditionally. He had chosen me. That choice weighed more than blood. And yet, I couldn't ignore the other truth. My biological father's shadow lingered, even in death. If he was truly as dangerous as they said, then who else had been part of his world? Who might still be out there, keeping tabs on the life I thought was ordinary? The next day, I met Daniel again. We sat in his car at the edge of an empty parking lot, away from curious eyes. I handed the photograph back to him. My parents admitted it, I said flatly. He was my biological father, and they ended him. Daniel's face tightened. He didn't look shocked, only sad. I always suspected. Why? I asked. Why would your family know all this? He hesitated, then reached into his glove compartment. He pulled out a second photograph, one I had never seen before. It was the same man, my biological father. But this time, he wasn't smiling. He was standing with two men in suits, his expression hard, calculating. And in the corner of the photograph, almost hidden, was Daniel's father. I blinked. What the hell is this? Daniel sighed. Our fathers worked together, not as friends, but as associates. My dad got tangled in his business, and when things went bad, we were collateral. That's why we left. My parents knew staying meant being dragged into a world that could destroy us. I stared at the image, while rising in my throat. What kind of business? Daniel met my gaze, and his answer was like a blade. Organized crime. Extortion, smuggling, violence. Things you only read about in headlines. Your father, your biological father, wasn't just dangerous. He was the kind of man people whispered about in fear. And when he disappeared, a lot of people started asking questions. Questions that never had answers. My chest tightened. And now someone's still asking. Yes, Daniel said softly. And they won't stop until they get them. That night, I confronted my parents again. I demanded the whole story. Dad poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands steady despite the storm. We didn't act alone, he said. We had help. People who also wanted him gone. But when he disappeared, the vacuum left behind was dangerous. Rivals, enemies. Everyone wanted to know who had the guts to remove him. We kept our heads down, raised you, pretended to be ordinary. Mom added, her voice trembling. But ordinary never erases bloodlines. People will always wonder where you came from. And if they realize the truth, if they realize who your father was, they may come after you, too. To use you, to punish us, to settle debts. The room spun. My life felt like a cruel play staged by strangers. I wasn't just the product of love and lies. I was a legacy no one wanted, and yet everyone feared. I whispered, "So what do I do now?" Dad looked at me with an intensity that shook me. "You survive. You choose who you are. Not him. Not his enemies. You." In the weeks that followed, the tension in my life grew unbearable. Strange cars lingered near my apartment. Unfamiliar numbers called my phone and hung up when I answered. At night, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door, fading before I could check. Daniel stayed close, his loyalty unshaken. "They're testing the waters," he told me. "Seeing if you're aware. Seeing if you'll slip." My parents urged me to leave town, to vanish like Daniel's family had years ago. But I couldn't. Running would only make me a target. Instead, I chose to face it. I began digging myself through old records, court filings, fragments of news articles about men who went missing in the shadows of the city. Every thread led me deeper into a labyrinth my parents had fought so hard to keep me out of. And at the center of it all was him, the ghost of the man who had fathered me but never wanted me for anything more than power. And yet, despite everything, I found clarity. I wasn't him. I wasn't his lies, his crimes, or his shadow. I was the child my stepfather raised, the one who had been loved fiercely, protected at all costs. That was the truth I chose to keep. But here's the part that still haunts me. A few weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, blank except for one sentence typed in the center. "Blood remembers." I stared at those words until they blurred, my heart pounding in my chest. Whoever had sent it knew. They knew the truth Daniel had uncovered, the truth my parents confessed, the truth we tried to bury again. And if blood remembers, then maybe the past wasn't done with me yet. Epilogue. That's the story my childhood friend uncovered. The deception my family thought they had buried forever. A secret built on blood, betrayal, and survival. And while I don't know what the future holds, I do know one thing. My family will never be the same again. Because once a lie is shattered, there's no putting it back together. There's only living with the broken pieces.